And we're live. Thanks for tuning into the stream, everybody. We're joined here with a special guest on the Cassius Morris show today, Matt Cassidy. My man, how you doing?
Not bad, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. I've been looking forward to doing something with you, and today it's a pretty unique episode because this is my second time tackling a movie reaction. This first reaction, the both of us have not seen this film ever before, and we've only seen it once. So this is a true first reaction to The Silence of the Lambs, a classic film that most people were surprised and shocked that I haven't seen, which makes sense because, I mean, when you talk about the great films, this is usually what comes up. It came out in 1991, directed by Jonathan Demme and adapted from the novel The Silence of the Lambs. Now, this movie, Matt, I don't know how you were first exposed to this movie, but for me, I just remember being in Blockbuster as a kid, uh, which is one of the weirdest things about people of our age range because we were there just for the end of the Blockbuster era,
Yeah,
and now we're
yeah.
like children of the Netflix streaming era. But when I was in Blockbuster, I remember this being the most scary, mysterious DVD cover for me, just a picture with the butterfly on the lips, and that was always burned into my mind. What's your first memory of being made aware of this film?
I think it was actually a DVD case in my parents' basement. They, how they have a big box of DVDs. I remember going through the movies and just seeing the Silence of the Lambs, and I was like, "Well, that looks scary." Off to the next one.
So you didn't want to watch it?
It's not that I was opposed to watching it. It was just like, well, I don't really know what this one's about. I just didn't take the time to find out what it was, I guess, and yeah, my parents were kind of strict anyway, so I was like, not even worth the trouble.
No, that totally makes sense. Mine too. Like I was the type of dude that I couldn't watch Family Guy till I was like 9 or 10. You know what I mean? Like The Simpsons was even a no go.
Yeah.
I appreciate my parents for caring. See, for me, like I feel like that was my first awareness of this film, and then I remember being aware of Hannibal Lecter and of Anthony Hopkins' portrayal of that character because it was always brought up in the great cinema. Were you aware of Anthony Hopkins' presence in this film and how that was something to be expected?
Not at all. I'm not, to be completely honest, I'm not even familiar with Anthony Hopkins' work.
Right.
I mean, I may have seen him in some movies and not even have known it, but
Hmm.
no, not at all.
Same here, actually. I mean, I was aware of this guy who played this character with the piercing bluish eyes. Um, and I think that really that was my first exposure to Anthony Hopkins. So let's jump into the film. Once we start this film, and this is a spoiler alert, by the way, so nobody complain in the
Yes.
comments.
Yeah.
I don't want to see anything. We start this film, and it starts off basically describing Hannibal Lecter from Clarice's perspective. What were your thoughts on the opening of this film?
Well, I thought my first initial reaction was, she's running. She's running, and she looked sort of like she was in distress, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. That may be some hint to like some foreshadowing.
Yeah,
Um, and then you find out that she's actually training in the FBI, and then she's making her rounds on the course, and then it's sort of, you're like, oh, okay, but still, she starts off going uphill, right? And she's already struggling from the beginning. And
right.
then once she actually gets into the FBI headquarters, if you'll notice, and I believe this is very intentional, where she walks into the elevator filled with very tall men, and she stands there in the center, and she is a short female, but she gets up, she gets out of the elevator, and she is the only one there. I thought that spoke so much about the character already within what, the first 5 minutes of the movie,
Yeah,
you know?
seriously. So you
Yeah.
picked up on that too, because for me in the beginning of the movie, I mean, it becomes very evident that they're trying to put you in the shoes of the character in either what they're seeing, but mostly in the beginning, what they're feeling at that moment. And right from the start, you feel this sense that the female in the situation is somehow alienated from from the rest of what's going on, but she's trying to achieve the same goal. And I agree with you, Matt. I saw that illustrated throughout the rest of the beginning. I mean, the FBI guy who's about to send her down, or I guess it was Hannibal Lecter's doctors hitting on her, saying, "Boy, the FBI knew what they were doing, sending a pretty young girl down here," you know. And basically, I guess you're feeling what I would assume is how some women feel in certain circles where it is more misogynist.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that it might have been an indication towards the fact that she is special in some way, right? Because
Hmm.
we know that this is in an era where misogynists were more common. Like, it's starting
Yeah.
to get better, right? But it definitely was a more common theme back in the day, right?
Hmm.
um so I think that this is an indication of how special she actually is, being able to go above all of these men who at the time might have been viewed more qualified just from the sexist perspective or the misogynistic perspective, right?
Yeah.
Of the generation. And so I really, really did enjoy that they made that very clear, that she's not fucking around,
Hmm.
you
No,
know
100%. And yeah, because you see her starting to deal with all this stuff right off the top, but you are also seeing it roll off her back, and she's not letting it get to her. She's goal
Yeah.
oriented. She's moving forward. Also, in the beginning of this film, it's pretty much all talk about Hannibal Lecter, and he hasn't been in the movie for at least the first 7 to 10 minutes, which is also some foreshadowing because Hannibal Lecter is the main character, supposedly, of this movie. But Anthony Hopkins is only in this film as Hannibal Lecter for 16 and a half minutes through the
Yeah.
entire film that's being recorded. So it's really interesting to me that he's the main character. The focus is all on him, and he's arguably the most memorable guy from the film. But it's because they're talking about him. He has a presence in the film when it isn't exactly physical. So,
Mhm.
what was your first impression when Clarice finally gets down after all this sort of foreshadowing about the character and sees Hannibal Lecter?
My first impression, I think this was intentional again. My first impression were his eyes,
Hmm.
and not even particularly his eyes, but maybe the surrounding areas, because
Hmm.
we know that when a smile is genuine, you get the creases here by your eyes.
Hmm.
His the way that it's shot, it's very intimate, it's very close up in their faces, and it gives a really good emphasis on his eyes. And I think that they're like predatory,
Hmm.
and you can you can tell that he is very blatantly in a state of euphoria whenever he gets in the grip of a power trip.
Right.
Whenever he is in that position, you can tell that he is loving every second.
He's
And
been waiting
that's,
for this moment.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that he did such a good job portraying that. I was really blown away by the performance, because I was like,
Yeah.
holy wow.
Seriously, it's incredible, man. And you make a good point. Like he really doesn't have much emotion on his face, like the emotion that a person who's happy for a good reason or a natural reason would have. Yeah, it's some sort of demented, euphoric mania, I think would be a way to describe it. And I
Yeah.
mean, they really take you so deep into the foreshadowing of this character because when, like, even when you're going through, like Clarice is going through the gates and then she goes past those first three guys, you know, one of them's going insane. One of them is sitting there in a catatonic state. The other guy, you know, throws the jizz on her. Or I guess that's later in the scene, but he cusses her out. And you expect to see, like, the last scene you expect to see is something horrific. Like, you expect to see a dead guy in the cage and he's eating him. But you see a guy completely composed,
Hmm.
standing there, says, "Good morning."
Yeah.
And I thought that was crazy. I mean, they take us for almost 15 minutes working us and working us about how this is the most evil, dangerous guy in the world. And you encounter him and he's completely normal. And
Hmm.
I also love the directing style as well, how they have it basically from this point on, they start having it in perspective shots. You're seeing what the person is seeing when the character is talking to them, and then it switches. So I thought that was one of the highlights of the directing of this film. It was absolutely beautiful. So Buffalo Bill, he ends up coming into this movie sort of a subplot of this film that I wasn't quite expecting. Um,
Hmm.
I was confused when I first saw it, but I think I right away knew he was abduct somebody or do something. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Yeah, you knew something was off.
Definitely, that was and
Yeah.
apparently they took the inspiration for that scene from what Ted Bundy would actually do. Apparently, Ted Bundy would actually pretend to have a broken arm and be like carrying something to get the girl near the van, and he would throw her in.
Hmm.
Um, just one of the many reasons that this portrayal of Buffalo Bill by Ted Levine is, for me personally, one of the most chilling and realistic portrayals of a serial killer ever on camera. I mean, especially the scenes that come towards the end when Clarice encounters him in person. I feel like I'm there and I feel like I'm at risk, but I'm at home. I mean, what were your thoughts on his performance generally?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I think so. The whole how we get introduced to Buffalo Bill is he kidnaps that girl.
Mm-hmm.
I forget her name.
Yeah.
Um, but they see it on the TV in the FBI, right? And they try to do this thing where the mother is trying to speak to Buffalo Bill, uh, saying, saying her name over and over again and trying to make her seem more human. And they were just like, wow, this is so smart. But as you learn more about Buffalo Bill and who he is and his identity issues, like he was trans, so he believes that he's a woman or identifies as a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that makes the thing on the TV so much worse because
Yeah.
it's going to create feelings of envy, like, oh, she was born a woman, she was
Right.
born, how she feels she is, and he was not, right? And
100%.
so I think that there's a real, I want to say, insidious feeling of danger there, because you think that they're doing everything that they can to prevent Buffalo Bill from hurting their daughter, when really he's gonna get even angrier at
Right.
that,
It's
you
almost
know?
like a tool to fuel his anger. It's fuel to his fire. And this movie definitely, looking back historically, got a lot of heat when it first came out, especially from the transgender community, which I think was struggling a lot more to have a voice at that time. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that I can see how some people would see that, but at that same token, it is a representation of like 0.001 or less of the population that are afflicted with that type of illness. Um, but I don't personally see it as a representation of all trans people, nor should anybody, because that's not how the vast majority, 99%, would act. Um, but yeah, it is a really interesting layer to the story, and it's also was sort of uncharted waters because they didn't go deep into making you understand why. They just basically told you
Hmm.
this guy has issues identity wise, and you can sort of fill in the blanks from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of get pieces here and there,
Yeah.
based on just the times that he is on screen. Um, I will say, however, through watching this movie, I understand a lot of Eminem's music now.
Okay. Why's
I
that?
believe a certain 3 a.m. song from the
Oh,
Relapse album. You put
yes.
the lotion in the bucket, put the
Oh,
lotion on
shit.
the skin,
And
or
then they
else it
get the
gets the
hose
hoses.
again.
Yeah, and so like I think I've seen memes, but I actually didn't know where that was from.
Me
And
either.
yeah, and Eminem actually made another song called Buffalo Bill, and I had no idea. But
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I just thought that was a cool little thing that I just failed to get until now.
No, that is cool. I actually had no idea about that. And yeah, there's such a multi-layered character. There's actually some people theorize that in the lotion scene when the girl starts crying. By the way, what an impeccable actress who played that hostage. I hate that I'm forgetting the
Hmm.
character's name, but her performance overshadowed that for me. I didn't care what her name was because she was
Yeah.
just Oscar worthy performance. I hope she won
Hmm.
something. But some people theorize that when Buffalo Bill is mimicking her scream, he's actually trying to teach himself how to scream like a female when she's in distress. So it's like all these things, like if that were to be true, or if somebody were to perceive it that way, that makes it so much more scary than just a guy mocking, you know?
Yeah. No, actually, that's really interesting because that was one of the things that I was stuck on.
Hmm.
I wasn't entirely sure what that scene was supposed to mean, right?
Yeah.
Like I picked up on a lot of things, but I'm not going to pick up on everything. Um, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me because he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, impersonating it, right? And the whole time
Hmm.
he's not really like he wasn't really trying to be his own person. He was trying to be like a mixture of women. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so favorite moment of the film. Do you have a favorite scene or moment?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what's that?
By far, I think my absolute favorite moment is at the end where Buffalo Bill has the night goggles on
Hmm.
and he is just inches away from the back of Clarice's head.
Yeah,
And he just backs off and she's looking frantically right at him, but she doesn't know it. And he is right there. And
unbelievable.
that was a work of art. I think that was a
Yeah.
work of art. That was by far the I just love it. I love it so much.
It
Yeah.
was fantastic because
Yeah.
it was like a moment of cat and mouse. Like he has his prey right there. He has an easy kill, whatever
Hmm.
shot he wants, whatever angle. But he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna savor and enjoy this
Yep.
moment because I am a true psychopathic killer, and that's exactly what makes this guy so chilling. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just incredible the portrayal. I agree with that. The best moment for me was when Hannibal Lecter, you get the moment with the pen. You see how he takes the pen. They take you through this moment for
Yep.
so long. And when you forget about the pen, it comes up and he gets himself out of the handcuffs, kills the two cops. I said spoiler alert. I don't want to see
Yep.
any comments. But man, that scene was just impeccable. And you know what? I actually thought this movie, my expectation was it to be more, that it would be more like that. You would see more of Hannibal killing. And I think those expectations are misplaced because I believe that's more in the Hannibal movie and TV series. I haven't seen it personally.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the thing about the show is I watched the show before the movie, right?
Okay. Okay.
And so I suppose I could have mentioned that earlier.
It's
Uh,
all good.
um, um, so what I think was really cool is if you watch the show, they pull a lot of things from the movie. A lot of things are inspired from the movie. Um, but one of the things that I want to touch on is mostly the character of Hannibal Lecter
Hmm.
in comparison to the movie, like in the show. And so in the show, Hannibal Lecter is. Do you remember how I was talking about Hannibal's eyes in the movie
Hmm.
and how they were predatory and dangerous, and he was blatantly obvious about the power trip? Well, in the show, he is much more friendly.
Okay.
His eyes are welcoming. He is like you would never expect that he is capable of doing what he does unless you see it for yourself. You know,
Right.
he works with the FBI in the show, and it's just the performance. I don't know which one's scarier because in the movie Hannibal, you know that he has you beat, and he knows that you know that he
Right.
has you beat,
There's no
right? So
mystery there.
there's no mystery. Like you can see it all. He knows, but he has you in a corner. You're trapped, and you kind of just got to do what he's intended.
Yeah.
But in the show, no one has a clue. No one, except for one or two people, have any sort of idea that anything is going on, but he is 10 steps ahead of you and already has your
Hmm.
fate
That's cool.
determined.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a very, very interesting portrayal of the character, and I think that that show was very, very well done.
Hmm.
um but yeah, so in the show, they Starling isn't in it. Clarice isn't in it. It's Will Graham, and
Okay.
he's a teacher for the FBI, and he works with them as a consultant, and become Hannibal Lecter actually becomes his therapist because he has like some genius IQ in certain areas.
Hmm.
And so that story sort of is based around that. um Also, Dr. Chilton is exactly the same as he is in the movie, which
Okay.
I noticed that
He's the exact
his
same.
yeah, pretty much like his demeanor and everything, different actor, but
Yeah.
his character, spot on, was not changed pretty much at all,
I like
right?
that.
Yeah,
It
I
almost
love.
portrays that he's like so stubborn in his set in his ways he wouldn't even change if it was, you know what I mean, a different person. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just the same thing all across the board. And that
Mhm.
it actually this movie Silence of the Lambs also gets a lot of credit for being one of the most realistic portrayals of a book on screen. I mean, you look at like the last movie I talked about on here was The Shining. The author of the
Mhm.
book hated the movie. He said it was a,
Yeah,
basically a piece of trash and made his own show to compensate for that. So
yeah.
I think this movie was super well done. For me, the main takeaway from this film was I think that it is more so a story about power struggles between men and women that display themselves in different ways than it is about a serial killer. I think Hannibal is more about Hannibal, obviously by nature, but this one is a lot less about Hannibal than I thought. And I think if you're paying attention to certain things that they're putting up on the screen or certain scenarios, they're not there for no reason, and they do make you feel a certain type of way for a reason. So I feel like the stuff with Clarice and the FBI mixed with the fact that it was Buffalo Bill victimizing women. There was direct victimization of women. There was indirect victimization of women. So I think that that's a pretty strong point to think that that's most of the theme. So that was my main takeaway from the film. I don't know about you.
Well, my main takeaway, I think about how far we've come with psychology now as opposed to back then. Like, already we are so much farther ahead.
Light years
And
ahead.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that it was, honestly speaking out, on the common misunderstanding of mental illness,
Hmm.
and how much how much we don't really know, or how much they didn't know, right? Because like the thing on the news where Clarice was watching in the FBI and they were trying to make her daughter sound human. um if they know what kind of mental illness they're dealing with, they'll know what kind of approach to take. And Hannibal Lecter, being how he is, right? He is able to give a profile, right?
Yeah.
And so I think one of the scariest aspects of that movie is the not knowing. Like, you don't know Buffalo Bill, even if you might think you do. You don't know Hannibal Lecter, even if you think you do,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And even now, we don't have a full entire grasp of mental illness and all of the things that may come with it. And so I think that that was one of the biggest takeaways, where it was portraying this feeling of mental illness, misunderstanding, and despair, and especially on Buffalo Bill's part, because he just wants to be who he feels he is,
Yeah.
but then he goes about it in a horrific way,
Right. For
right?
sure.
And so I think that the portrayal of that was very, careful and meticulous in order to create the vibe of the show, or the movie. And yeah, I don't know. I just, because he is misunderstood and he wants to just be who he is, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, people are not accepting of that. Um, but yeah, I I just think it's a lot. It's a big mental game with
Yeah.
these sort of movies and shows. This one in particular. Yeah.
Seriously, it is. And I love the fact that we came away from it with different standout points because I definitely see what you saw as well. And that
Mm,
stood out to me in a way also. So thank you so much for joining me on this, dude. This has been a hell of a lot of fun. And I think we should definitely do it again.
absolutely.
Can people
Yeah.
find you online? Is there anything you're looking to get out there?
I mean, I do have a YouTube channel. I'm still trying to grow it. I've been on a little hiatus for the last little bit, but I'm trying to get back on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's I go by, all of my social media is the Village Blonde, and yeah, my YouTube, Instagram, that sort of stuff. That is all the Village Blonde. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Beautiful. I definitely encourage people to check it out. I was watching those daily vlogs. I'm hoping they come back. I'm hoping
yeah,
I know you're going to do your thing and you got things in the works.
yep,
Hope everybody enjoyed this. You can follow the podcast on all social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Cassius Show. I'm on social media at Cassius Morris, Instagram, Cassius Morris _ and please subscribe to the podcast right here on YouTube. I'm trying to build my subscriptions. You may be listening right now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify. Hit that subscribe button and please leave a rating/review or comment of the show. Definitely want to know what you guys think. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, it's Cassius Morris saying, rock on.